All right. He is up on the video now. And look, that was a long chat we had with the Israeli ambassador. But a number of foreign affairs issues are kicking around at the moment. Helen Clark, it would seem, is the darling of the mainstream media. And many think, indeed, that somehow she's running the country or we should do what she says. Fresh back from a diplomatic mission abroad, and the acting Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Winston Peters joins us by video link now. Mr. Peters, thank you for your time this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Firstly, could we address the issue of recent events in the Middle East, the missile strike? We've just had a long chat with the Israeli ambassador, and it would appear to be that this isn't going to escalate short-term into World War III. Your thoughts on what has happened between Iran and Israel over the last few days?
Well, it has a very long history, but it doesn't at this point become the issue. The issue is that any escalation will be disastrous for the Middle East and indeed the world situation itself. And so that should be clearly the message that we give to the partners or the players or the participants in this strife at this point in time. And that's what we've done.
All right. And it would appear, I'm not sure of Foreign Affairs assessment, that there is some calm. There hasn't been an immediate military response, and the Israelis calling for sanctions rather than missiles.
Well, at this point in time, the event is finished. As bad as it might have become, it's not as where we may have been concerned as to where it was going. So at this point, calmness needs to be reinforced in the interest of the tragedy we've got in Gaza and the circumstances we're trying to deal with. None of this helps at all.
Minister, you've just back from the United States. In your absence, mainstream media here went off and published, it seemed to me, ad infinitum criticism of you and the discussions you were having from a former Prime Minister, Helen Clark, suggesting that without any mandate, this government is changing our independent foreign policy. Would you care to respond to that?
Well, that statement is without any foundation at all. First of all, we're talking about the Pillar 2 of AUKUS, which Chris Hipkins, then the Prime Minister, when it first became part of the attention of the New Zealand government, the previous government, and Andrew Little said that they were looking at it and they were working on what it meant for New Zealand. That's the identical position we're in here right now. Now, the second thing is you've got Helen Clark making comments which seemingly don't seem to remember that it is July 14, 1984. They're going into an election, Labour is, opposing nuclear weaponry and saying that they wanted to remain within ANZUS despite that policy if they were to be successful. So it wasn't an alliance or defence thing that about then or now, or when did they shift, so to speak? And so those sorts of conversations that were going on, accusing Judith Collins and I of being secretly in Washington, scheming and plotting with the Americans, so to speak, when she was across the Midwest at a meeting to do with space and future policy there. No connection whatsoever, and claiming that I was a week in Washington doing this when I was there for a day is just extraordinary. And New Zealand media should actually, before they repeat some of the comments of these people, do some fact-checking as to whether there's any merit in what's being said here.
Do you find it curious, as I must admit do I, that a non-elected former politician with a clear, if you like, tribal political bias gets so much time and gets so much credibility in commenting about current events and current policies of the government? She said, well, no, who gave you the right to pursue these policies and have these discussions? Well, I presume the New Zealand people did by the vote at last year's election.
But here's the point, I would say, Helen, look, you're far more experienced than that, and you know about being consistently, surely. Did you say that when Hipkins made his comments in 2023 or when Andrew Little made his comments? No. So why did you wait until I was offshore at a series of serious, important meetings to make that comment about us? It's just meritless. It's not without any substance or fact. And while the media should give that person as a former Prime Minister whose briefing was on these matters was last 16 years ago. That sort of coverage is beyond me.
I still want to, I guess, address, though, one issue she raises. And whether or not, let's have a hypothetical, we join Pillar 2 of AUKUS. Would that in any way inhibit our ability to make independent decisions when it comes to foreign policy?
One of the first speeches I made last year to the diplomatic corps and elsewhere was that New Zealand has and prides itself on an independent foreign policy. But then I said at the same time, every other country has the same view about the independence of their foreign policy. It means that you can have friends and disagree with them, and you can have enemies and yet on some issues work with them. There's a lot to this, and when you say that somehow this has been compromised, my question is, we'll follow the speech that was made by the incoming government and its foreign minister on that particular point, which was widely applauded by the diplomatic corps who understood what we were talking about.
Okay. Would it, though, bind us in certain circumstances to joining collectives, joining alliances in certain circumstances? That's my fundamental question. Is Pillar 2 of AUKUS something that has binding obligations on the Pillar 2 members in terms of taking action or taking certain stances on the world stage?
Look, Sean, these are all good questions, but they're utterly premature
Right.
at a time when we have just begun conversations and discussions as to what this might all mean. And what that might all mean is a discussion, having had with them, we have to have with the New Zealand people as well. But anybody who believes we live in a benign strategic environment, which was Helen Clark's statement years ago, I don't believe understands what's happening in the world now in so many parts of it, and that it never was relevant then and it was not relevant today. So we've got to be there with our eyes wide open, examining all the options we've got available to us, intending to be the friends of all and the enemies of no one, but being at the same time wide open in our approach to what we're looking at. Okay. That's exactly the discussion we're having.
Okay. And were the joining of Pillar 2 to create obligations on New Zealand that do not exist now, do we have your assurance and the coalition government's assurance that those issues would be canvassed and debated publicly in New Zealand before any such commitment was made?
Look, I know something about the process of government. Before giving you that assurance, my job is to make sure that I go to my government colleagues and apprise them of what the latest developments are. And when we've had that discussion, consented to by the Cabinet and the caucus, the coalition's government parties itself, only then am I free to talk about that. But see, everyone's getting way ahead of themselves because somehow that's headline-making stuff.